A piano played in the darkness. Off-key notes, irregular rhythm, fingers stumbling over the keys like a child learning to walk. It was midnight at Central Mercy Hospital, and in the abandoned auditorium on the third floor, someone was massacring a Chopin sonata. And at the door, leaning on a wheelchair, Augusto Veríssimo listened to it with a mixture of horror and fury. Augusto Veríssimo, the most celebrated pianist of his generation, the man who had played for presidents and queens, the genius who at 17 was already called a prodigy. Now, at 45 years old, with the right side of his body completely paralyzed by a devastating stroke, he was forced to listen to this desecration of the music he loved. But what he didn't know, what no one that night could imagine, was that this man playing so badly in the dark was about to teach him the greatest lesson of his life. A lesson that would begin with an impossible question. When are you going to stop playing with your hands and start playing with your soul? To understand how Augusto arrived at this moment of complete humiliation, I need to take you back 15 years, to a night when he was at the peak of his glory. Carnegie Hall, New York, a concert sold out months in advance. Augusto glided through Chopin's nocturnes with a precision that made experienced critics weep. He was perfect, technically impeccable. But there was something cold in his performance, something that a few perceived but no one dared to say. He played with his head, not his heart. With arrogance, not love. With the need to prove he was better than everyone, not with gratitude for being blessed with that gift. That same night, backstage, a 20-year-old young pianist waited nervously to meet him. His name was Daniel, and he had just played in the new talent competition that took place before the main performance. Daniel was good, very good, but there was something in his execution that separated him from true geniuses. His hands trembled slightly. A mild neurological condition, the doctor said, nothing that would prevent him from playing, but enough that he would never achieve absolute technical perfection. When Daniel finally managed to reach Augusto, his eyes shone with admiration. "Mr. Veríssimo, it was an honor to be on the same stage as you today. I know I'll never be as good as you, but I wanted to say that you're my greatest inspiration." Augusto looked at that young man in simple clothes, with hands trembling as they held the concert program, and felt only contempt. "You're the one who played before me? The Beethoven?" Daniel nodded, hopeful. "Yes. Did you notice any passage I could improve? Any advice?" Augusto smiled, but it was a cruel smile. "My advice? Give up. I heard you play. Your hands betray you every 3 measures. You'll never be a real pianist. At best, a mediocre teacher in some suburban school. Don't waste your time chasing a dream that's beyond your capabilities." Daniel's face paled. Around them, the few people who heard fell silent, shocked. But Augusto had already turned away, was already walking to his dressing room, indifferent to the destruction he had just caused. To him, it was just honesty. The world of classical music was cruel, and the sooner that young man accepted his limitations, the better. What Augusto didn't see, because he didn't bother to look back, were the silent tears running down Daniel's face as he crumpled the concert program and left that theater, left that dream, left everything he had planned for his life. Years passed. Augusto continued his meteoric rise. Acclaimed recordings, world tours, awards that filled an entire room in his luxury penthouse. He was adored by the public but feared by everyone who worked with him. Orchestra musicians whispered stories of his rage attacks during rehearsals. Producers knew he was capable of canceling entire concerts if some detail wasn't perfect. And his personal assistants never lasted more than 6 months, because Augusto had the gift of finding a person's deepest wound and rubbing salt in it whenever he was in a bad mood. But there was one name Augusto never heard again. Daniel simply disappeared from the classical music world. And Augusto, if he ever thought of that young man, it was only as further confirmation that he was right. The boy clearly didn't have what it took. Another common soul who dreamed too big. Augusto, after all, was surrounded by greatness. He had married Isabella, a beautiful and talented violinist, and together they were the golden couple of classical music. Life was perfect, or at least it seemed so, because behind the velvet curtains and deafening applause, Augusto was empty. Isabella noticed, tried to reach him, but it was like trying to embrace a marble statue. He was cold, distant, incapable of true intimacy. "You don't love me," she said one night after a particularly brilliant concert. "You don't love anyone. Not me, not the music, not yourself. You only love the applause." Augusto laughed at her. "Don't be dramatic. I have concerts on 3 continents in the next 2 months. I don't have time for your existential crises." 3 weeks later, Isabella left. She left a simple note. "I hope one day you discover that perfection without love is just pretty noise. Goodbye, Augusto." He crumpled the note and threw it in the trash. The next day he was on a plane to Berlin. There was a concert waiting for him, and concerts didn't require you to feel anything but absolute control over 88 keys. But something inside him, something small and insistent, began to crack. It was like an invisible fissure in an expensive porcelain vase. On the outside, still impeccable. On the inside, beginning to break. And then came that morning. An ordinary Tuesday morning, 6 months after Isabella left him. Augusto was in his penthouse, practicing a particularly difficult Rachmaninoff he would play that night. His hands flew over the keys with machine-like precision. And then, in the middle of an ascending scale, his right hand simply stopped responding. It didn't hurt. It didn't freeze. It just stopped. Augusto looked at it, confused, tried to move it again. Nothing. And then he felt a strange weight falling on the right side of his face. He tried to get up from the piano bench, but his right leg didn't obey. He fell, hitting the right side of his body on the polished wooden floor, and the last thing he saw before losing consciousness was his right hand, lying inert on the floor like something dead, like something that was no longer part of him. Severe ischemic stroke. That's what the doctors said when he woke up 3 days later in the hospital. Significant damage to the left hemisphere of the brain, responsible for motor control of the right side of the body. Complete paralysis of the right arm and leg. Possibility of recovery? Minimal. Possibility of playing piano professionally again? 0. The word echoed in Augusto's mind like a death sentence. 0. He tried to speak, ask if there was any experimental treatment, any surgery, something, anything. But the words came out slurred, difficult, because the stroke had also slightly affected his speech. In the months that followed, Augusto went from hospital to hospital, from specialist to specialist. He spent fortunes on treatments. Intensive physical therapy. Occupational therapy. Acupuncture. Even healers who promised miracles. Nothing worked. His right hand remained closed in a rigid claw, his arm hanging useless at his side. And slowly, as his body refused to heal, something worse began to happen. His mind began to crumble. Depression. Anger. Denial. Bargaining. Augusto went through all the stages of grief because he was grieving. Not for the person he was, but for the only thing he valued, his ability to play. Without the piano, who was he? Nothing. Less than nothing. Just a broken body that was once great. News of his stroke spread throughout the classical music world. There were messages of support, offers of help, benefit concerts organized to raise funds for his treatment. But Augusto refused everything. He had his team say he wanted privacy. The truth was he couldn't bear the idea that the same people who applauded him would pity him. 6 months after the stroke, Augusto was admitted to Central Mercy Hospital, not because he needed acute medical care, but because he simply had nowhere else to go. His penthouse had been sold to pay medical debts. Isabella, when she learned of his condition, sent a kind but firm message. She was rebuilding her life and couldn't help him. He had no close family, or at least no family he kept in touch with. True friends? He realized he never had any. Just acquaintances who orbited his fame. And now that the fame had faded, they had disappeared too. Central Mercy Hospital had a program for long-term patients who had no financial means or family support. Augusto was now part of that program. He, who had played for royalty, now shared a room with 3 other patients in a public hospital. The irony was so bitter he could almost laugh. Almost. But laughing required a lightness he hadn't felt in a long time. All he felt was an immense, black, bottomless void. He spent his days looking out the window, watching the city below without really seeing it. The doctors said physical therapy was crucial, that he needed to keep trying. But for what? To recover maybe 30% of mobility? To be able to hold a fork by himself? What difference did it make? Without being able to play, without being able to do the only thing that gave meaning to his existence, what was the point of fighting? And it was in this state, in the darkest depths of his depression, that Augusto first heard the piano being played at night. It was midnight on the first Tuesday of the month. Augusto was awake as he always was, because sleep was difficult and nightmares worse. And then he heard it. Piano notes, distant, muffled, coming from somewhere upstairs. Someone was playing. No, massacring. Playing so badly it was almost an offense. Curious despite himself, Augusto managed to maneuver his wheelchair out of the room. The hospital corridors were empty and somewhat frightening at night, lit only by emergency lights. He followed the sound until he found a service elevator. With difficulty, using only his left hand, he managed to get in and press the button for the 3rd floor. The doors opened to an even darker corridor. But the music was louder now. It came from double doors at the end of the corridor. Augusto approached and pushed one of the doors slightly. It opened to a small auditorium, probably used for lectures or hospital events. And there, on the stage, under a single light someone had left on, was an old upright piano. And sitting at it, playing with intense concentration, was a man in a hospital janitor's uniform. The man was about 50 years old, gray hair, shoulders bent from a lifetime of physical labor. And his hands, Augusto could see even from a distance, trembled. They trembled as they tried to navigate the keys, creating such a distorted version of Beethoven's Moonlight Sonata that Beethoven himself would probably turn in his grave. Augusto felt anger rise in his throat. How dare this man? How dare he take a masterpiece and destroy it like this? You're doing it wrong. The words left Augusto before he could stop them, slurred but audible in the empty space of the auditorium. The janitor stopped playing immediately and turned. In the darkness, Augusto couldn't see his face clearly. "Sorry," the man said, his voice soft, almost gentle. "I didn't know anyone was listening. I only use the piano when the hospital is empty. I don't want to bother anyone." "Bother?" Augusto gave a bitter laugh. "You're destroying Beethoven. If you don't know how to play, don't play. It's that simple." There was a silence, and then the janitor said something unexpected. "Do you play?" Augusto felt as if he'd been slapped. "I played," he spat the word like poison. "Before this." He raised his useless right hand. "Now I'm just another invalid in a wheelchair." The janitor slowly came down from the stage, walking toward Augusto. As he approached the dim light of the corridor, Augusto could finally see his face. There was something familiar about him, something that poked at a distant memory, but he couldn't identify it. "I'm sorry for your loss," the man said, and it sounded genuine. "It must be terrible to lose something you love." "You have no idea," Augusto replied. I was important. Augusto Veríssimo. Maybe you've heard of me." The janitor tilted his head. "Yes, I've heard. You were very famous." "Was?" Augusto repeated the word bitterly. "Now I'm nothing." The janitor went to a chair in the auditorium and sat down, as if preparing for a long conversation. "Can I ask you a question, Augusto Veríssimo? When you played, were you happy?" The question caught Augusto off guard. "Happy? I was the best. Of course I was happy. I didn't ask if you were the best. I asked if you were happy." The janitor leaned forward. "Because I heard you play once, many years ago. On a recording. And it was technically perfect. There wasn't a wrong note. But..." He hesitated. It seemed empty. Like you were showing how skilled you were but weren't really feeling the music. Like your heart wasn't there. Augusto felt fury explode inside him. "How dare you? You who massacres Beethoven in the dark, dare to judge my music? Who the hell do you think you are?" The janitor wasn't shaken. He simply looked at Augusto with eyes that seemed to hold an ancient sadness. "I'm someone who learned the hard way that technique isn't the same as soul. And I'm trying to spare you from learning the same lesson too late." "Too late?" Augusto laughed, a harsh, broken sound. "Look at me. Do you see this? My career is over. My life is over. There is no too late, because there's nothing left." The janitor stood up and walked back to the piano. He sat on the bench and placed his trembling hands on the keys. "Do you know why I play here at night, alone?" he asked. "Because you have nothing better to do?" Augusto replied with sarcasm. "Because I love it. I love music so much that it doesn't matter that my hands betray me, that I'll never be good, that no one will ever applaud me. I play because when I play, even badly, even stumbling, I feel something. I feel joy. I feel gratitude. I feel connected to something greater than myself. And that feeling, Augusto, is worth more than all the applause at Carnegie Hall." He began to play again, the same shaky, imperfect version of Moonlight Sonata. And Augusto listened, and for the first time he didn't just hear the mistakes. He heard something else. Love. Every imperfect note was soaked in it. When you stop crying for the hands you lost and start using the heart you've always had, you'll discover you never needed your hands as much as you thought. The janitor said this without stopping playing, without looking at Augusto. Music doesn't live in the hands. It lives in the soul. And your soul, Augusto Veríssimo, is still alive. It's just hidden behind a lot of pride and pain. Augusto felt something break inside him. Something big and fundamental. Tears began to fall, and he didn't hold them back. He cried there in the dark, listening to a janitor play piano badly, and it was the most beautiful music he'd heard in years. Because it was real. It was honest. It was human in a way his own music never was. When the janitor finished, he stood up and walked toward the exit. He stopped beside Augusto's chair and placed a gentle hand on his shoulder. Come here every Tuesday at midnight if you want. It would be nice to have company." And he left, leaving Augusto alone in the dark auditorium. Augusto stayed there for hours, looking at the piano on the stage, and feeling something he hadn't felt for so long he almost didn't recognize it. Curiosity. Oh, maybe, just maybe, there was still something. Not what it was before. It would never be what it was before. But maybe something different. Something new. Something true. The following Tuesday at midnight, Augusto was back in the auditorium. The janitor arrived minutes later, smiling when he saw Augusto there. "You came back." "I don't know why," Augusto mumbled. "Yes, you do," the janitor replied, climbing onto the stage. But this time, before he started playing, he turned to Augusto. "What's your name?" Augusto asked. "You know mine, but I don't know yours." The janitor was silent for a long moment. And then he said, with a voice that trembled slightly, "Daniel. My name is Daniel." The world stopped. Augusto felt his blood freeze in his veins. No, it couldn't be. This janitor couldn't be. But as he looked more closely, as he really saw the man for the first time, he recognized him. The eyes. The shape of the face. 15 years older, marked by time and hard work, but yes, it was him. The young pianist he had destroyed backstage at Carnegie Hall. "Daniel," Augusto whispered, and the name came out like a confession, like a plea for forgiveness. "Yes." Daniel came down from the stage and walked until he was face to face with Augusto. "You remember me?" It wasn't a question. I didn't know you worked here. I didn't know that the promising young pianist became a hospital janitor?" Daniel finished the sentence. "After that night, after what you told me, I stopped playing. Completely. I sold my piano, dropped out of the conservatory. Your words, they convinced me I was nothing. That I would never be anything." Augusto felt shame so deep it was almost physical. "Daniel, I'm sorry. I was wrong. I was an arrogant idiot who—" "Let me finish," Daniel interrupted him, but his voice wasn't angry, just firm. "I spent 10 years without playing a single note. I worked jobs I hated, lived in a void you can probably understand now. And then, 5 years ago, something happened. My sister died. Cancer. And at the funeral, they played the Moonlight Sonata. They played it badly, a cheap recording. But hearing that, even badly played, made me remember why I fell in love with music in the first place." Daniel sat in a chair next to Augusto. "I realized that day that you were right about one thing. I would never be a virtuoso. My hands would never obey perfectly. But you were wrong about everything else. Because music isn't about perfection. It's about expression. It's about connecting your heart with the heart of whoever's listening, even if it's just yourself. So I started playing again. Not for audiences. Not for approval. Just because I love it." "And do you forgive me?" Augusto asked, his voice broken. "For destroying your dream?" Daniel thought for a long moment. "You didn't destroy my dream. You changed it. And honestly, maybe I needed that pain to learn what really matters. So yes, Augusto, I forgive you. The question is, will you forgive yourself?" Augusto had no answer for that. But that night and the Tuesdays that followed, something began to change. Daniel played and Augusto listened. And gradually, Augusto began to offer suggestions. Try to feel the music breathe. Let the notes have space. Don't worry so much about getting it right. Worry about feeling it. And while he taught Daniel, he was really teaching himself. Lessons he never learned in his entire brilliant career. A month passed. Then 2. And one Tuesday, Daniel looked at Augusto and said, "Play with me." Augusto shook his head violently. "I can't." "You know I can't. I didn't ask you to play with both hands. Play with your left. I play with my trembling hands. Together, we'll make something beautiful." And there, in that empty auditorium at 2 in the morning, something extraordinary happened. Augusto, with tears running down his face, placed his left hand on the keys for the first time in a year. And Daniel, sitting beside him, placed his trembling hands. And together they played. It was imperfect. It was clumsy. Wrong notes, irregular timing, pauses where they shouldn't exist. But it was the most beautiful thing Augusto had ever created. Because for the first time in his life, he wasn't playing to prove anything. He was playing to feel, to express, to connect. They played every Tuesday now. And gradually, other hospital staff began to appear. A nurse working the night shift. A sleepless resident doctor. The building security guard. They all sat in the darkness of the auditorium and listened to those two men, a paralyzed former genius and a janitor with trembling hands, create music that came not from perfect technique, but from finally honest souls. And then, on a Tuesday 3 months after that first meeting, something impossible began to happen. Augusto was playing with his left hand, lost in the music, when he felt a tingling in his right hand. He stopped playing abruptly. He looked down. His hand, which had been closed in a rigid claw for over a year, had moved. Just a millimeter. Just the index finger that trembled slightly. But it moved. "Daniel," he whispered, his voice full of fear and wonder. "My hand. It moved." Daniel looked and his eyes widened. "Try again. Focus. Not on the hand. On the music. On what you want to express." Augusto closed his eyes. He took a deep breath. And he thought not of scales or techniques, not of perfection or approval, but of everything he felt. Gratitude. Regret. Hope. Love. And he put all of that into the intention of moving that hand. And it obeyed. Not much. The fingers opened a few centimeters. But they opened. The auditorium, now with perhaps 7 or 8 people who had become their small regular audience, exploded in excited whispers. But Augusto barely heard them. He was looking at his hand as if seeing it for the first time. In the days that followed, the doctors were incredulous. Tests showed no change in brain damage. Neurologically, this shouldn't be possible. "It's mind over matter," one doctor speculated. "You created new neural pathways through sheer willpower." "Or it was a miracle," Daniel said quietly when they were alone. Recovery was slow. Painfully slow. But month after month, Augusto regained movement. First the fingers, then the wrist, eventually the elbow. The physical therapy he had abandoned, he now attacked with fierce determination. Not because he wanted to go back to being who he was, but because he wanted to see where this new journey would take him. A year and a half after that first meeting in the auditorium, Augusto managed to play a simple scale with his right hand. It wasn't fast. It wasn't perfect. Some fingers still didn't fully obey. But it was music. It was life. And that's when Daniel arrived at the auditorium one Tuesday night with something in his hands. Sheet music. "I wrote this," he said shyly. "A composition. I thought maybe if you want we could play together. It's simple. Made for 4 imperfect hands." Augusto looked at the score. It was technically simple, yes, within the limited capabilities they both now had. But it was beautiful. Melodic, emotional, honest. "You composed this? You taught me I had more to offer than I thought. So I tried." They practiced for weeks. And then Daniel made a bold suggestion. "There's a small hospital charity concert next month. Just to raise funds for the long-term patient program. Staff performances, hidden talents, that sort of thing. I thought maybe we could play our music." Augusto felt immediate fear. He, who had played for thousands, was now terrified by the idea of playing for maybe 50 people in a hospital gymnasium. Because before he hid his soul behind perfect technique. Now he would have to expose himself. Imperfect, vulnerable, real. "I don't know if I can," he admitted. "You can," Daniel said with certainty. "Because you're not playing to prove something anymore. You're playing because you love it. And love has always been the greatest technique of all." On the day of the concert, Augusto was so nervous his hands were sweating. His right hand trembled, not just from the residual neurological condition, but from pure fear. Daniel sat beside him on the bench and whispered, "Remember what you taught me? Breathe with the music. Don't think. Feel." And then they began to play. And it was imperfect. Wrong notes here and there. Timing that wavered. Augusto's hands didn't have the speed they once had. Daniel's trembled more when he was nervous. But there was something in the music, something indescribable, that made every person in that small audience stop and really listen. Because what they heard wasn't technique. It was story. The story of 2 broken men who found redemption in the thing that should have destroyed them. Music born not from perfection but from forgiveness. Not from arrogance but from humility. Not from talent but from love. When the last note sounded, there was a moment of absolute silence. And then applause. Not the polite applause of a charity audience but genuine, emotional applause. Many were crying. And Augusto looked at those 50 people, many of them hospital patients, staff working double shifts, tired relatives visiting sick loved ones, and saw something he'd never seen in all his audiences of thousands. He saw real connection. They weren't applauding because he was the best. They were applauding because he was true. Later that night, back in the empty auditorium, Augusto sat at the piano alone. He looked at his hands, the left strong, the right still limited but alive. And for the first time in his life he said out loud, "Thank you. Thank you for the gift. Thank you for the fall. Thank you for the man who reminded him of what really mattered. And thank you for the second chance not to be who he was, but to become who he should have been from the beginning." Daniel entered the auditorium and saw Augusto there. Thinking? Praying actually, Augusto replied, surprising himself. I've never done this before. Pray. But it seems right. Daniel smiled and sat beside him. You know, he said, I spent a long time angry at you. Then I spent time feeling superior to you. Look how he fell and I became a better person. But the truth is we needed each other. You taught me that talent without love is empty. I taught you that love without talent is still valuable. Together, we learned that talent with love is the only thing that's really worth it. You're a wise man, Daniel, Augusto said. How did I never see that before? Because you were playing too loud to hear anything, Daniel replied. Sometimes we need silence to hear the most important music. The music of our own soul. They sat in comfortable silence for a long time. And then Daniel asked, what are you going to do now? The doctors said you can be discharged from the program. You've recovered enough to live independently. Augusto thought. He had some remaining savings. He could rent a small apartment. Maybe give private piano lessons to beginners. A life so different from what he had. But the idea no longer terrified him. In fact, there was a certain peace in it. And you? He asked Daniel. Will you continue being a janitor? Daniel shrugged. For now. It's a good job. Honest. And it gives me access to this piano. He gave an affectionate pat to the old, out-of-tune instrument. But maybe I'll also give some lessons. To children who think they're not good enough. To show that being good enough isn't the point. We'd make a good team, Augusto said slowly. Teaching together. You teach heart, I teach technique. Together we teach real music. Daniel looked at him, hope growing in his eyes. Are you serious? Completely. We don't have money for a studio, but maybe we can ask the hospital if we can use this auditorium a few afternoons a week. In exchange, we do monthly charity concerts. What do you think? And that's how the School of Music for Imperfect Hands was born. Not officially, of course. It was just two men in a hospital auditorium, teaching children whose parents couldn't afford expensive music schools. Children with conditions that proper schools said would prevent them from playing. Shy children, scared, convinced they weren't good enough. And Augusto and Daniel taught them not just music, but something much more important. They taught that imperfection isn't a curse. It's an opportunity to be human, to be real, to play not despite your flaws but through them. 2 years passed. The school grew by word of mouth. Local newspapers ran stories about the famous pianist who fell and rose in a new way. Donations began to arrive. Not great fortunes, but enough to buy decent instruments for the children. Enough to formalize the school as a non-profit organization. And Augusto, who once measured his worth by applause on grand stages, now found satisfaction in seeing a 7-year-old with cerebral palsy manage to play her first scale. Did you see? She shouted, so proud. I did it. And Augusto felt more joy in that moment than in all his gala concerts combined. One autumn afternoon, Augusto was in the auditorium preparing the next lesson when he heard a familiar voice behind him. So it's true. You've become a teacher. He turned and saw Isabella standing in the doorway. She looked exactly as he remembered, perhaps with a few more lines around her eyes, but still beautiful. Isabella, he said, surprised. What are you doing here? I read about you. About your school. About your transformation. I needed to see it with my own eyes. They talked for hours. She told him about her life, how she eventually found happiness playing in a regional orchestra, how she married a kind man who valued her. And Augusto told her everything. The stroke, the depression, Daniel, the slow healing, the rebirth. When he finished, Isabella had tears in her eyes. You finally learned, she said softly, what I tried to teach you all those years. That perfection without soul is just noise. You were right. About everything, Augusto admitted. I'm sorry for being so blind. For wasting our time together chasing things that didn't matter. Isabella shook her head. It wasn't wasted. It was part of your journey. And look where it led you. You're doing more good here in this small auditorium than you did on all the grand stages of the world. She stood up to leave but stopped at the door. Augusto, I'm proud of you. Of the man you've become. After she left, Daniel found Augusto sitting at the piano looking at his hands. Are you okay? Yes, Augusto said and realized it was true. I was just thinking about how much time I wasted. How much time I could have spent creating instead of competing. Loving instead of proving. But you can't change the past, Daniel said gently. You can only redeem it. And that's exactly what you're doing. The following spring, the school organized its first formal recital. Not in a grand theater, but in the hospital gymnasium, decorated by the children themselves with paper flowers and colorful paintings. Families came, as did many hospital staff who had fallen in love with these unlikely students. And one by one the children played. Some in wheelchairs. Some with fingers that didn't move right. Some with anxiety so severe they trembled. But all with hearts so full of love for music that every imperfect note sounded like perfection of a different kind. At the end, Augusto and Daniel played together. The same composition Daniel had written years before, now expanded, matured, but still fundamentally honest. And as they played, Augusto didn't think of Carnegie Hall. He didn't think of the concerts he would never give again, the reviews he would never receive again. He thought only of those children, looking at him with admiration not because he was famous, but because he understood them. Because he too was imperfect. Because he too had fallen. And risen in a new way. When the music ended, the children jumped from their chairs applauding. And Augusto looked at Daniel, and Daniel looked back, and without words they communicated everything that needed to be said. Thank you. Forgiveness. Love. Redemption. All the great stories in an exchange of glances between two men who should have been enemies, but became each other's salvation. That night, long after everyone had left, Augusto stayed alone in the auditorium once more. He placed both hands on the piano, the left strong and sure, the right still limited, still trembling slightly but alive. So alive. And he played. Not for anyone, just for himself. For the God he was learning to know. For the journey that broke him and rebuilt him into something better. And for the first time in his entire life, Augusto Veríssimo played piano and was completely, perfectly happy. Because he finally understood what Daniel had tried to teach him that first night. It's not about the hands you have. It's about the heart you put into them. It's not about being the best. It's about being true. And in the end, when your life is summed up, when all the noise and fame and applause have fallen silent, the only thing that remains is the love you gave. The only music that matters is the one that touched another human being's soul and said, "You're not alone. You are seen. You are valued. You are loved." And then Augusto understood. The stroke wasn't a curse. It was a mercy. Because it took from him the only thing that was preventing him from being who he should be. And in its place, it gave something infinitely more valuable. It gave humanity. It gave humility. It gave a second chance to do things right. And he wouldn't waste this chance. Not this time. Have you ever wondered if what you think is your greatest talent might actually be your greatest prison? If the perfection you pursue is preventing you from being truly free? Augusto spent his entire life being the best, and only when he lost everything did he discover what really mattered. It's not about being perfect. It's about being real. It's not about impressing the world. It's about touching a heart. Even if it's just one. Even if it's your own. If this story touched you, if you saw something of yourself in Augusto or Daniel, if you carry your own imperfections as shame instead of as opportunities to be human, leave a comment. Share with someone who needs to hear that it's not your abilities that define you but your heart. And subscribe to the channel Lives with Destiny, but only if this story really spoke to something deep inside you. Because here we don't tell stories to pass the time. We tell stories to change lives. To remind you that second chances exist. That redemption is possible. That you can fall and rise different, better, truer. And that in the end, the most beautiful music you can play is that of your own soul, finally free to sing.